Jerusalem on the brink. The second untold story of the first century. Welcome back to Lost Chapters, where we are unearthing the untold stories of the first century. This is our second Taylor's story of faith, fury, and fire. They say a city holds its breath before heaven's wrath falls, and Jerusalem breathed deep in 70 AD. Herod's massive expansion glittered under the sun-white limestone blocks, ornate colonnades, and the hum of pilgrims at Passover. Built nearly 600 years earlier, the Second Temple stood at the heart of Jewish identity, culture, and worship. Over generations, resentment grew under heavy taxation, corrupt governors, and religious interference. But beneath the stones, tension boiled. Judea had been a Roman client state since Pompey's conquest in 63 BC. By 66 AD, that resentment ignited. Jewish rebels drove out Roman forces in a violent uprising. Rome's response: total reprisal. Roman standards in the distance, pilgrims walking, a subtle undercurrent of tension in the scene. Emperor Vespasian dispatched for legions, placing his son Titus in command. The Jewish-Roman War had begun. Inside the city, Jewish factions splintered, zealots clashed with Pharisees, tempers flared, unity unraveled. Some rabbis wanted peace, some warriors insisted on holy war. As Passover worship ended, the city prepared for war, not celebration. Heated debates were held in temple courts, and concerned priests were glancing over their shoulders. They built massive siege walls, trapping everyone inside, cutting off food, water, and hope. In April 70 AD, Rome's legions converged on Jerusalem. Jewish leaders stockpiled provisions. Families hid in cisterns, children slept in cellars. But starvation and disease spread like wildfire. Relics like the menorah and sacred vessels vanished into Roman hands as trophies. And the Romans didn't just wait. They attacked. Siege engines thundered. Walls shook. Gates splintered. Roman engineers constructed ramparts and siege towers. Debris and dust clouds were rising, and terrified families were in huddles. For nearly 5 months, Jerusalem held, until, finally, its greatest treasure, the temple, fell. On the 9th of Av, the sanctum was breached. Flames consumed the sacred halls. The fire burned more than stone. It burned the soul of a nation. Temples were in flames. Thick smoke was rising to the sky. Roman soldiers were looting, and ruins were smoldering. Winter of 67-68 AD saw Jerusalem torn apart not by the Romans alone, but by its own people. Zealot factions, led by Eleazar ben Simon, John of Gischala, and Simon bar Jorah, turned on each other in a brutal struggle for control. In a shocking move, zealots burned grain and fuel stores enough to feed the city for years in the name of unity. But this only deepened the crisis. Armed zealots were clashing, and civilians were fleeing amid the smoke. The historian Josephus lamented that this hatred, without cause, did more damage than the Romans themselves. Titus established camps on the Mount of Olives and scouted every angle. By spring of 70 AD, Rome's legions for strong moved in. Roman engineers were laying out siege lines. Their battering rams and siege towers broke through within weeks. Then the second wall followed by mid-May, beginning April. Romans started with the third wall to the north. Yet when Roman soldiers entered the narrow streets, Jewish fighters ambushed them, turning the alleys into death traps and stalling the advance. By June 5th, Roman soldiers breached the middle wall, placing Jerusalem's heart within reach. Passover pilgrims, trapped within, intensified the turmoil. But once lit, it was unstoppable. Starvation, disease, and desperation were everywhere. Even stories of cannibalism emerged. Then came the climactic day. Romans stormed the Antonia fortress overlooking the Temple Mount. A fire broke out, whether accidental or intentional remains unclear. Roman soldiers plundered, slaughtered, and enslaved survivors. It shattered a people's faith and marked the start of a diaspora that reshaped world history. The flames consumed Herod's masterpiece, the Second Temple, destroying its sanctuaries, altars, and the Holy of Holies. Temple Mount blazed. Golden columns were melting and smoke plumes rising. By August 4th, 70 AD, Jewish resistance had crumbled. The city fell. The temple lay in ruins. The siege of Jerusalem and the destruction of the Second Temple didn't just end a war. The city was smoldering in ruins. Roman banners were flying, and grieving refugees were wandering. A world left in ashes. Jerusalem lay devastated, its walls in ruins, its people scattered, its sacred temple burned to the ground. Roman soldiers looted mercilessly. Relics, gold from the temple, sacred artifacts were ripped away and paraded in Rome. Immortalized in the Arch of Titus, Roman legions were marching down the Via Sacra carrying the golden menorah, overlay with relief from Arch of Titus. Inside the city, over 1 million people died or were enslaved. Only the 3 towers of Herod's citadel and part of the western wall were spared. Josephus records Rome's cruelty. Those who tried to flee were crucified along the roads. A mother known only as Mary of Bethesua was driven to cannibalism, roasting her child's flesh in a desperate act of despair. Inside the walls, famine had already unleashed horrors unimaginable. The famine was a weapon, as deadly as any sword. The holiest institution in Judaism was lost, and with it, an entire way of life across the city. Josephus wrote of families starving on rooftops, bodies falling unburied, some turned to eating dung. By the 10th of Av, in Jewish tradition, the temple's destruction became eternal. Jews fast worldwide, mourning the loss of Jerusalem. Monks placed stones at the western wall with teary eyes. The Sanhedrin survived, but only by moving to Yavna. It was there that Rabbinic Judaism was born. Prayer and Torah study replaced sacrifice. What once defined Jewish faith pilgrimage to Jerusalem? Sacrifices in the temple shifted forever to synagogue worship and sacred scholarship. It was a turning point in human identity. Meanwhile, the survivors scattered across the world, captives and refugees marking the beginning of the Jewish diaspora. Their sorrow echoed through the centuries. In Rome, prayers still drift to the Western Wall. This was more than a military defeat. It was a cultural, spiritual, and demographic earthquake that reshaped not just Judaism, but the entire future of Western and Middle Eastern civilization. The destruction of the temple wasn't just a page in history. Ancient ruins were merging into modern synagogues and churches. The fall of the Second Temple was not just an end, it was a beginning. In the immediate aftermath, Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai escaped the siege by feigning death and convinced Vespasian to allow him to found a new center of Jewish life in Yavna. This new academy became the nucleus for Rabbinic Judaism, shifting worship from the temple to prayer, Torah study, and synagogue life. The rabbis declared that the temple's destruction was due to Sinit Kingdom. Baseless hatred between Jewish factions, a lesson woven into their teachings to prevent sectarianism from tearing them apart again. Ancient sacrifices and priestly rituals gave way to community study and ethical debate in the diaspora. This shift wasn't only theological, it was cultural and social. Synagogues became houses of worship across Babylon, Alexandria, and beyond, ensuring the survival of Jewish practice. Debates held on why were we divided. Unity builds. Despite the loss of the temple, Jewish identity endured and adapted. The oral law, the Mishnah, and later the Talmud would be codified, preserving tradition and redefining sacred life outside Jerusalem. Prayers murmured before the Western Wall, the recitation of lamentations, individuals bowing in prayer, and shattered pottery pieces remind from destruction, remembrance grows. Spiritually, the temple's end marked a transformation from a religion anchored to one place to a faith that crossed borders and time. Historically, it ushered in the Jewish diaspora, altering the map of world Jewry and embedding millennia of resilience into their story. Don't forget to subscribe. The Lost Chapters. Join us next time as we reveal another untold tale from the first century, history they never taught you.